Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this Heath Tech World event. Today, we're focusing on paralysis, and we're going to have a discussion lasting about an hour with a fabulous and very experienced and diverse panel of experts today. I'm not going to introduce that panel. I'm going to let them introduce themselves and say a few words about who they are, the organisations that the leader represent, and their particular area of focus. And then we'll widen out the discussion. If anybody watching has any questions, then of course you can stick them in chat and we'll try and thread those into the discussion. And when this content becomes available on YouTube and a number of other channels, please share it as widely as you can. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Andy Dolan to introduce himself, and then we'll work through the rest of the panel. Andy, if you'd like to say a few words about yourself and your organisation, please.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you. Thank you for having us and putting together the forum. Much appreciated. So Andy Dolan, I'm the Vice President of Marketing at Onward Medical, a company that is creating innovative therapies to restore movement independence and health in people with spinal cord injury. Our work builds on more than a decade of basic science and research conducted at leading neuroscience laboratories. And our mission is to translate this research to available therapies we call ARC therapy, which is targeted programmable stimulation of the spinal cord to drive various functions. So that's Onward, and myself, my role here will be marketing and building up a commercialization and market access organization. My background, I've been in medtech for about 20 years, both on the larger company side, working in established markets, and also more recently, almost 10 years, specifically in spinal cord injury and neuro rehab devices. So look forward to chatting with everyone.
That's great. Thanks very much, Andy. If I could move on to Lindsay, please.
Yeah, sure. And again, echo what Andy said. Thanks for having us. Thanks for hosting, Alistair. Pleased to meet everybody. Andy and I know each other very well. So I'm founder and CEO of Hannison Green. We're a neurotech staffing business, primarily aimed at the startup world. We help companies move, kind of transition from being a research-led organization to a commercial-led organization by helping companies identify their leadership talent, strategic talent.
Great, thank you, Lindsay.
Primarily within neuromod, I should say.
Okay. Great. And I know we'll come back and talk about the importance of people in driving forward some of the areas that you mentioned, Lindsay. Sure. Leor, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here together. I think it's a great team. Nice roundtable on the topic. Myself first, I'm the CEO of Neuroxon Biologic. I have a PhD in pharmacology and Bachelor in chemical engineering. I have many years in the liposomes fields, and Neuroxon is actually moved from the liposomes to exosomes in my aspects. We are building exotherapy technology. It's an exosome EV-based technology loaded with the siRNA to aim against CNS indication and also acute spinal cord injury. That's our mission. It's a biological or biopharmaceutical product, non-invasive. I will explain it more, but it's going intranasally, crossing the BBB and getting actively target the spinal cord injury. We built the company after a very nice proof of concept on rats, and we are finalizing the project and the product, moving towards an IND submission and a FDA for first clinical trial. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that, Leor. And last but not least, Marco.
Hi, everybody. Marco Baptista. Again, thank you so much for having me. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer at the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. I'm relatively new. I started back in April. We have a mission at the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation to cure paralysis, try to cure spinal cord injury, and bring really treatments to the market that will benefit the quality of life of those individuals. I worked about 5 years in big pharma. I was at Merck. Then after that, I spent 10 years at the Michael J. Fox Foundation. Pleasure to be here.
But first, before we get into the discussion, please make sure to subscribe to the Heath Tech World YouTube channel and like the video. Also, let us know what topic you'd like to see discussed in future roundtable events.
Marco, if we could maybe stay with you, Marco, I think it'd be interesting to hear all the panelists talk a little bit about what they think the big priorities or the big issues are with reference to how treatments and support for those suffering for paralysis are widened and made more accessible, and the speed at which those things are developed and brought to market. Could you say a little bit of what you think the priorities are, or the priorities of your organization, or the big issues that require attention?
Sure, Alistair. Yeah, I think if we start with the premise that not one group is going to solve the entire problem, and that we need all the different players, we need industry, we need academia, we need nonprofits, everybody working together, because we know that spinal cord injury is incredibly complex. Then I think that leads us to the natural next stage, which is making sure that we're sharing the information that needs to be shared for people to better understand spinal cord injury, for people to develop new hypotheses. So I think a big push that I'm doing at the Reeve Foundation is to make sure that data gets to see the light of day, and it gets published, and it gets placed into open data sharing repositories. I think this is could be a key problem in this field. It's definitely a problem in a lot of other fields, and we just want to make sure that people are not spinning their wheels, especially if data has already been generated, and make sure that data is open.
I'm sure we'll come back to that, encouraging collaboration and a sort of open book approach to making sure that there's a joined up approach to some of the issues. Leo, I don't know if you identify with that, or maybe there's other issues.
Absolutely, I fully agree with Marco here. And this is also the approach that I'm bringing to Neuroxon. We are a small company, startup company. We are public now in Toronto Stock Exchange Venture, and you can see our recent PR talking about collaboration and having different LOIs signed by me with different players to understand more what we are doing and how we do it better. It's with the German company, it's with the UK company, and it will continue like that because I don't know everything. And if we participate and take together the journey to find the end for paralysis, or paralysis, I would say, that it will be the shortest way. And it's not only one player. Absolutely agree with Marco.
Andy, I can see you're nodding your head at that as well.
No, it's fully agree with all. So I think, as opposed to being redundant, I'll add comment from our perspective. First I'll even point out onward, we have a code. When our, CEO, Dave Marver, took over leadership of the company, one of the first things he did was establish code, a few key things that we want all employees and all people to know about us, think about us, and collaborative is actually one of the key ones. It's a highlight of ours. And if you look at where we even come from, our partnership, and Gregoire Courtine had founded the company, and he now continues to be our chief science officer, but also be the director at Neurostore, the research partner. So we work obviously with them on the early stage research. But when you look at how many partnerships and collaborations across different academic centers and different research facilities in the US and Europe that he works with, that feeds this knowledge base, because we look at our role very much in this terms of, to echo Marco on, you need the partnerships, you need the different players. What is your expertise? We're a med tech company. We're going to develop tools and devices that are based off of that research. So for us, that collaboration is the lifeblood that feeds the funnel of what we want to do. But we also want to feed that back as we develop the tools to make sure they're meeting the researchers' needs, opening up to the researchers. A lot of the reason we actually exist was, Greg Warr and his team and Jocelyn Block, they were doing the research with devices available to them, pain stimulators, technology that was built for other purposes, and getting great results. I mean, we think we should look at what they've done. It's fantastic. But the technology at one point was almost holding back the science. Like if the tool would just do this, I could reach this goal and be more targeted and programmed. So if you look at that circular collaboration, that's what we see as just what has been the missing piece traditionally, is industry being that key player to support what the researchers and the advocacy groups like, the Reeve Foundation and others have been driving for all along. So echo what I've heard from both speakers, but want to add that is Onward's largely reason for existing, and our purpose is to collaborate and advance and bring tools to the people who can use them, which is the spinal cord injury community.
Thanks, Andy. Lindsay, I can see you nodding as well, but it'd be interesting to hear you maybe talk about the need for sort of human capital to make all of that happen, because I guess attracting the very best talent into the areas that we've just talked about is clearly fundamental.
Well, any company really is only as good as the sum of the parts of its human capital, right? Because you can have the best idea, the best technology, the best anything, but without the right team around you to put that together and bring it into becoming a reality, then, there's so many great ideas that happen out there in every day in every industry that never amount to anything because the right team isn't there to make it happen. And the point that you've just raised there, I'll just echo, I'm in a very technical company here. So I'm not a medical engineer or a scientist, but what's quite unique about my position is I get a holistic view of the industry sector. Mm-hmm. I only work with startups. I only work with neurotech startups, and I get to talk to a lot of CEOs and a lot of leaders within these businesses to understand their methods, their processes, some of the technology and the science behind what they're doing. And I'll just echo what you guys are saying. I think there is a fundamental problem in the industry with a lack of maybe collaboration and information sharing, because a lot of these startups, they're private companies, they can become very insular. And a lot of them are run by leaders that might not necessarily have the experience of bringing a company through and bringing research and science through into the commercial world. And I think, like Andy said, seems like Onward's set up very well in that sense in terms of collaborating. But yeah, I think we just need more awareness between companies, socially, in the media. There just needs to be a lot more noise and awareness of what is actually coming through in the background, because it doesn't need me to say that there's a huge lack of therapy for people that have got SCI, that are living with SCI right now. But some of the companies like Onward and I was researching your exome today before this meeting. Wow, fascinating what you guys are doing. And I talked to a lot of New Votion in New York.
The new medicine. That's the new medicine. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just fascinating. There's so much stuff being worked on in the background. We just need to hear more about it, and people just need to talk more.
That's an interesting point, Lindsay. I mean, if I could come back to you, Marco, awareness of the kind of areas that you're operating in. Is there enough? It seems to me that in terms of a range of ailments and illnesses and things that afflict people, there maybe isn't as much awareness of paralysis and spinal injury as one might imagine. Is that a big part of the battle to get governments, investors and others to see this as a sort of burning area of issues that need to be tackled with urgency?
Yes, I do think it's part of the challenge. I think things are changing for the better, and we are getting the awareness out there. We are seeing technologies, for example, what Onward Medical is doing, and the effect that it can be having on individuals. And these are all big wins that I think people then pay attention to, investors pay attention to, other companies pay attention, that there is progress, and that this isn't what's been quoted before as the graveyard of neuroscience. So I think a lot of people are getting more attracted to this type of research, and they're seeing a lot of progress happening. That's very exciting.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Is that your experience, Andy, that the awareness of the kind of fields that you're operating in is just growing steadily and people are becoming much more alert to what's going on and the need for investment and more focus?
Oh, absolutely. And I'll answer the question directly, but just one comment. I think that, are we starting to see a little shift? You know, Lior, you mentioned you've been able to, excuse me, publicly list and generate some fundraising and the things you need to do. And Onward in October, we also listed Euronext, and we've actually understood it to be the largest early stage medtech IPO in European history. So we did raise considerable funds. And I think that in and of itself shows two companies that have spinal cord injury specifically in their missions or their vision statements. Raising capital is a newer thing. I don't think we've seen that historically. Even in the neuro rehab space, it's the sort of smaller market, just to use how investors might look at it. So I think that in and of itself shows you there might be some progress. But the point on, I think, very much resonates with me and hits home on the understanding the SCI community and the needs of them. If simply, people in the past had listened to them, they've been saying it all along, right? That, look at for example, a lot of people cite Anderson 2004, the famous paper regarding the first ranking or the voice of the SCI community, what they want from function, what they want from restoration. And I could say about a decade ago, when I kind of came into the spinal cord injury world from different med tech markets, I would have thought that walking and that lower limb function was the need. It was, let's get people moving, and I just had no idea. I had no basis to know how SCI affects a whole person. So that's the education that I've seen expand. I know now when we approach people about their needs, they're more open in discussion with. Walking is still ultimately a goal. A lot of people, I don't want to say resist that, but they say, well, wheelchairs, mobility, I'm moving around is not my challenge. My challenge is, and they present a number of things: upper extremity function, bowel bladder management, blood pressure regulation, all these things. So in my, observation, just from a sort of industry perspective, is there is more awareness towards that, but it still needs to increase. When you look at as a company, we're responsible for getting the word out regarding our technologies and our progress. And I can say firsthand, when we have a study or some advancement that relates to walking and the media gets the optics of the person standing walking, these are awesome stories. We love sharing them. We had some BBC coverage earlier this year from Gregoire's research at NeuroRestore, where complete spinal cord injury, Asia A, were walking, taking steps, with assisted devices, but ambulating on their own. And the coverage was immense. People love the story. The news regarding, for example, a blood pressure regulation improvement probably wouldn't capture that same general public attention. But within the SCI community, I think it captures as much, if not more, credibility, showing that we're addressing the underlying challenges that either need to be addressed primarily or at least before we get to a step of function and improved ambulation. So I think it's definitely the awareness is improving about the needs of the SCI community. I think the gap with the general public and other stakeholders is more around how broadly the disease affects different people and how much they might have other goals than just the walking.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andy. Lindsay, thoughts on that? Awareness?
Just when I first learned about SCI, and it was, if I think back now, it was probably when I started working with Dave Marver at Onward a couple of years ago, and I was fortunate enough to introduce Andy to Onward. I was naive in the sense that I just thought that spinal cord injury patients would want to walk again. That would be their ultimate goal, but it's not. They want independence. It's upper extremity. They want to be able to do things for themselves. And so I've been on a big learning curve with that. And Andy, you and I haven't had this conversation, but I spoke to Rano about this. So Rano's the global HR director of Onward. Onward are a shining example of a neuro model, neuro rehab startup that is increasing the awareness. Andy, you're absolutely right. I remember when I first started working with them and I would mention the name Onward, or they used to be called GTX Medical. Nobody's heard of them. Who are they? And I'd point them in the direction. I'd send them some links to some articles. And I said this to Rano the other week. I must have about 5 or 10 candidates reach out to me each week asking me, do you work with Onward? Can you get me in there? And these are people in the US, these are people in Israel, these are people in Europe and further afield. So yes, going public, but the social media presence and the media presence, the public presence of Onward is just, it's wonderful. And yes, more and more of that is absolutely increasing awareness for that population.
Thanks, Lindsay. Leo, I'm sort of interested in that journey that companies go through to go from sort of early stage to maturing and then getting products to market. Could you say something about how quick that process is and ways in which you might be able to improve the speed at which you run through sort of innovation, research, and actually commercializing products?
Yes. So we are still early stage. It's very important to say it. What we did is actually case study, I think, for Harvard Business School. We took a very early stage and go public because we thought that the story is good enough and strong enough, and we believe in our technology platform to be, first of all, for the spinal cord injury, and also after that for other CNS traumatic indications. The path to commercialization will be still 8 to 12 years. Nothing will change, okay? We are in the field of orphan designation. Spinal cord injury is orphan designation, so it may be less, okay? So, but still, it's a normal procedure with the FDA, EMA, to get the product to the market. You need also to understand, as a small company, we are in Israel and the market is not here. The market is in the US, in Europe. You need also to have transition after phase 2 or maybe after phase 3 and get it, this technology with bigger and stronger companies like Evox, like Kodiak that did with Takeda, with Eli Lilly, other big M&A deals that can be on the way to a full commercialization. Our technology is very strong because we tackle all the aspect of the product, the exosomes, which is the carrier, the drug delivery system. We have the loading technology that we have it in-house, capable for loading siRNA for the first stage and other small molecules in later stage. And also the ability to produce in 3D large quantities and large quantity of the exosomes of the EVs. And also our EVs have a completely different composition of matter, which make them better target the lesion or better target the inflammation site. So we can see really nicely with, if we color it with gold nanoparticles, going from the nose through the BBB directly to the lesion where is the impact.
Thanks, Leo. Andy, thoughts on that? If you're a member of the SCI community, I guess you're saying the quicker the better. I know there are no shortcuts, but thoughts on speed of commercialization?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a few thoughts on that actually that I think might be relevant to the topic that's been had so far and some of the stakeholders on the call. First, I'll say being a partner in this. So we have research and clinicians and advocacy and industry. So industry, our role is to know that process, know the expertise to develop not only great tools, well-researched tools that stand on the shoulders of the research that has been done, but also getting through the FDA channels. And oftentimes, in the past, I have viewed as a commercialization-oriented person that launch has been sort of a company's end goal. Their thinking is we'll get it out there. To me, the translation includes market access and policy and making sure they can get paid for. So I would say from the theme of partnership, this is industry's role. This is why we exist, is to navigate those channels, which are not quick, and there's not corner cutting because it's not appropriate for that. We want well-researched, well-studied, quality devices that meet the medical device regulations so they can be safely used, particularly when you think about devices being used in the home setting. I mean, someone on their own, the usability. So we look at, I'll say bluntly, the FDA and the notified bodies in Europe as partners as well, because they need to keep the community safe and keep people confident in devices that we're putting out have passed that level of scrutiny for that clearance. So our role is to know that. So to Lindsay's point, get the right people. And if you look at what Amr has tried to do, for example, our CTO, John Murphy, who leads our development teams, came from such companies as LevoNova and Abbott, these leading neuromodulation companies. So there's a real know-how. So we've put a lot of people in place who know the processes and can do it. But it does take time. And the thing I want to comment on that is, while we in the medtech industry might look at a 2 to 3 year pathway as practically imminent when you think about scaling your operations to commercialize and all those things, I also have the benefit of having a lot of interaction with the SCI community through events we do. Reef Foundation, we've had some salon events that we've presented at. And when you present timelines that show a launch of next year for our initial product, we're excited by that, but I'm grounded in the SCI community saying, why not yesterday? And it's a very fair point they make. I mean, we operate with a sense of urgency driven by the fact that if you use the NSCI-SC data, 18,000 people in the US are paralyzed or sustain an SCI every year. That's 50 a day. So, if we, from today's meeting to my meeting tomorrow morning, that's 50 more people who've entered the SCI community, double that when you include our markets in Europe. So we speak a little out of both sides of our mouth saying we're being deliberate in our pacing. We're focused on translation. We have a pathway, but those pathways, and one of the things we try to do is be very open and transparent on those pathways. So you'll hear a lot at congresses when we present, or when Dave presents to the public. We'll put timelines on the board. We'll hold ourselves to those to say, here's how we're marching towards that finish line of getting these devices to you, because we're entering a market that's probably been told for a decade or more. There's great research and maybe someday it'll be out there. So we try to be very transparent with those timelines. And if we have a delay or something, we'll be open and say, here's the new timeline. So we're very sensitive, not over-promising to a community that is living the disease every day and wants the solution or needs a solution ASAP. So I think as an industry, it's our role to advance deliberately, but within the processes that exist, but be transparent so the community trusts us in terms of when they might receive the solutions.
Thanks, Andy. Marco, obviously you're close to that SCI community.
Yeah, just to go back to the point that I agree that there's a very clear steps that need to be taken to get regulatory approval. I do think, however, there are many ways that we can still try to accelerate it. You could imagine that maybe a trial is conducted where the data was a little difficult to interpret. Maybe there could have been a little bit more, for example, mechanism of action work that was done, maybe a better understanding if it's a drug, how the drug is working in the body, how the body is working with the drug, these PK/PD parameters. Sometimes things go quickly into the clinic, and then if the trial fails, and we don't fully understand or interpret the data, this can slow the process down. I also think that with regards to recruitment and retention, that these are things that can affect how fast a clinical trial progresses. So going back to open data sharing, I mean, if you have access to a lot of data registries, you can actually make a trial more efficient, more quicker by having, for example, a control group based on digital data that you have. This was done with the drug Riluzole. So I do agree that things need to be conducted in a manner that's always addressing safety. I do think there are ways that we could explore to accelerate the process, and I've seen this in other fields, and I'm sure it can be done also in SCI.
Thanks, Marco. Marco, sticking with you, can we move on to talk a little bit about patient support and the access that patients have and the awareness they have, and how easy it is for them to access treatments and devices and services related to SCI. Is that an issue? And if so, who takes responsibility for that?
Yeah, I think we all need to take responsibility for that. When I was mentioning that it takes everybody to get to treatments, you need full engagement of individuals who have SCI. You need individuals to understand how they can search for clinical trials, how they can go to like an SCAtrial.org site and be able to understand and navigate what these trials are, if they have access to them, what does it mean to participate in them. And there's a lot of education that I think needs to be done with regards to participation of clinical trials. But without that participation, again, that will slow things down tremendously. You can go on clinicaltrials.gov and see all of these trials that have been ongoing forever, and you can tell that something has gone wrong with their recruitment, and they haven't been able to recruit or have to stop the trial because they can't recruit. Again, that's a way that we could, through education, help accelerate the progress of those clinical trials.
Thanks. Other thoughts on patient support and access, Leo?
Regarding Neuroxone, we are first of all aiming on the acute spinal cord injury because, frankly saying, we think that it will be easy for the company to show results. When we're going to chronic spinal cord injury, I think it's another story. We need to differentiate between the two groups, unfortunately. So for the first time, we will use acute spinal cord injury. There is, of course, question: when do you start to recruit them? How many days? What is their therapeutic windows? It's that's the biggest questions. We believe that we have around 2 weeks of therapeutic windows. The best way is not to do it so early, okay? So the control group will not be, problematic, because we have cases of regeneration, spontaneous regeneration and recovery also in humans. We don't want to see a control group that doesn't have a therapy. Suddenly we say walk again. We are not, of course, seeing only or expecting to see only walk. We want to see other functional recovery. So this is a big question: when you recruit, how you recruit it, because it's a very delicate situation. A family or the personnel is after a car injury or other injury. It's very delicate. You need to create the awareness that the therapy is there, and to also work together with the best KOLs in the fields to spread the word that some technology like us exists and it's ready to be tested in human. Yeah, that will be, when we will get to first in human, probably in 2024. That's how we will do it. Yeah. You're on mute.
I was just checking that you were paying attention there, Leo. Andy, I'm sure you've got a view on that, on patient support and access, and it's something close to the work that you do.
Oh, 100%. And I just want to comment on the last thing Lior said, because I strongly agree on the KOL piece. So when, this theme of partnership, we keep sharing here, a key partner for us. So if you look at, when we talk trials at Onward, that's, we're focused on our pivotal trials, which are the ones designed to get you your FDA, support your FDA submission. So obviously we have the early research feasibility, the work with NeuroRestore. When we think about pivotal trials, these are the ones where Onward, seeks research partners to conduct a trial. And I can't say enough about how important it is to find those right partners. So we just did completed a trial this year called the Uplift trial, which was completed enrollment December of last year, completed the trial and top line data this year, which was a 15-center trial, basically to look at our transcutaneous device and determine some key outcomes and ultimately submit to the FDA, the notified bodies in Europe. And when Marco said some studies sort of seem to drag on, or why aren't they completing, or why aren't they enrolling, that really hits home, because that, first of all, from an industry standpoint, that's just stopping progress. That's stopping the translation we seek to see. So when we did this trial, we found that our partners were just so enthusiastic, so capable of rallying the SCI community, of reaching them, informing them, and conducting a trial, that right in the middle of the COVID environment, which was stopping a lot of research, or at least slowing down, we had chronic populations, so people seeking to enter back into the healthcare system and the research system. We completed the enrollment ahead of schedule. And I think that's a testament to, hopefully what we feel this technology can do for people, and the awareness that's out there. but more so the research partners you select and their motivations and their drive. We as a company look at our role to certainly educate people on research opportunities available. So, we'll post them and discuss them openly and work with organizations to share that message that these trials are open. But really then it funnels to the clinic level, the research level, to screen them, enroll them, and get through the processes. So the company can be a part of that, but we really have to rely on the partnerships to drive it.
Great, thanks, Andy. Lindsay, I'd be interested in your view on this, because as you've already said, you're sort of a little bit outside and looking in and working with a number of companies in this area. Any thoughts from your point of view about the level of access and support available to members of the SCI community?
It's probably a little bit out of my, I'd probably be speculating somewhat. I'm not, unfortunately, in my role, I'm not close enough or that close to the patient, so to speak. So I haven't got that holistic view as the other gents have on this. So I'd be guessing more than anything.
Okay, well, you shouldn't do that, and I don't want to do that, Lindsay. Marco, how receptive are the clinical community to new treatments, doctors and hospitals? Are they in touch? Do they embrace new developments as they come through? Or is there sometimes a little bit of resistance?
I would imagine that a lot of times there would be resistance simply because of education and maybe not being aware of the research that is there. So I do think there is that gap that needs to be mended between communicating, the latest research, to the clinicians and to the doctors. I think education plays a big part there.
Yeah, it is something that we came across in some other areas of health technology, a sort of bit of resistance, because the medical community maybe doesn't keep pace with research and innovation. Lior, Andy, any thoughts on that?
Well, Lior, I was just make one quick comment. I'll turn views. I just want to piggyback on that with one thing on. I find it when I engage with the SCI community at these forums and these speaking events, actually, I think it's instructive in and of itself that people are asking for research opportunities. They're so, this again speaks to that translation piece, is they're so used to the only opportunity that they have to seek improvement in function and other things is research, right? So I just want to jump on what Marco said is that's what I think we need to change. I mean, we're talking definitely, support the research and get people funneled to trials and get the trials designed correctly to support, the advancements and all these things. But ultimately, our multi-year vision and horizon is to say, hopefully people are seeking these in the clinic versus the just research. So again, research is going to continue. It must. It's what's going to feed the continued innovation. But I think it's really exposes what the SCI community has sort of gone through with the underserving from, let's be blunt, from industry here, that their primary ask of us is when they can get in research. And that might affect 10, 15, 20, however many people are in that trial. And everyone else is sort of waiting for the results. So I just wanted to jump on that statement to say, this really shows why translation is so important, is we want the person to be able to seek it in the clinic near them on their terms, when they want it and when they're able to use it.
No, that's really positive, Andy. And thoughts on the receptivity of the medical community?
Yeah, and Leo, sorry, I jumped on if you want to.
Okay, so I agree with you. You are talking about the later stage and of course the startup, how you started. From our point of view, we saw it actually differently, completely differently. All our scientific advisory board actually asked Neuroxon to join because they saw the potential. We are talking about Professor Nachshon Knoller. He was the head of neurosurgery in Sheba Medical Hospital, which is the biggest hospital in Israel, is the biggest hospital in the Middle East, by the way. So he joined us. He was part of the clinical trial of Proneuron back around 10 years ago, something like that. And then the former chief of the rehabilitation joined because he understood the potential. He is getting the patient after Professor Nachshon Knoller is operating the patient. So he said the potential, we don't need to operate because it's intranasal administration. There is no operation needed. So there is a huge advantage. And then Professor Michael Belkin, he's actually ophthalmologist. He said, okay, if it's work for the spinal cord injury, why it will not work for the optical nerves? Okay, let's go ahead. I want to join. So at least from our point of view, maybe it's not representative at all, but when there is a strong technology, scientists, clinicians would like to join, okay? And if the clinician is good enough, he will join, he will promote it, he will be your champion, part of the champions that the company needs to promote the technology in the clinical aspects. So at least from Neuroxon, I'm really proud from our scientific advisory board, and I'm really hope that other company will have the same experience.
Yeah, there's definitely a drive that we've seen. I agree 100%. I mean, if you look at the trial we just finished, it was 10 top US FCI centers, and that was a selective process. It was, we had quite a few. And what's been really encouraging is after we've put out those results and talked more openly about the device design, the influx of interest in partnering on research. And this is where, back to that collaborative piece, we've opened up 2 programs this year. We've announced one is a basically investigator-sponsored study process, where once we're FDA cleared, it becomes much easier for an investigator to design their own trials. They're with a commercially available device, and we want to support those. So we have a process where we've invited the research community to submit their ideas, and let's work together to get them done. And then also on the technology side, with our implantable device, as I mentioned way at the beginning, Gregoire found the programming of the devices from the commercially available stimulators as limiting. So, we want to reverse that thought process and say, we have an API in the device, programming is open, adjust it as you wish. So the research community has really found interest in that. So I think we're really encouraged by the level of engagement we've seen, because I think the clinical community, the people, the SCI community are going to see on a regular basis their primary care and maybe some of the therapists. I agree there's probably a gap between the latest science and the technologies, but the research community has really latched on to, let's drive this forward. So agree, when you get the top researchers driving to you, that's a very good place to be.
Thanks, Andy. Just coming back to you, Marco, the role of investment and access to investment to power through some of this innovation and research and commercialization. Is that available in the way it should be? Does it support the kind of developments that the SCI community want to see to the right degree and as quickly as required?
Yeah, I think one way to accelerate investment interest is to set everyone up for success. That's why I started off the conversation about data sharing, talking about how clinical trials can be done more efficiently. Sometimes companies need more to complete their data package to make them even more attractive for investors. And anything that the Reeve Foundation can sort of do to elevate everyone up, this will catch the attention of investors and then put these entities in a better position to receive that type of investment. So again, through education, again, through supporting groups that maybe are lacking some data in their data package, that at some point, either a larger company that's investing in them or VC groups are going to be asking for. And we need to be thinking ahead and saying, well, there's a gap there. Maybe there's a way that we can help support that to put them in a better position, make them even more attractive for greater investment.
Oh, that's interesting. Leo, Andy, thoughts on that? Things that will make this sector more investment attractive or investment ready?
Shall I start, Andy?
Please, yeah, please.
Okay, I think we need to differentiate between the sector to two. I mean, governmental money, non-dilutive funds, and private placement, investments, VCs, and etc. Governmental, I would say, there are nice grants that you can submit in North America, in Europe, you can have in Canada, Praxis, Wings of Life, and etc. And I think also spinal cord injury, I think it's also attractive for the Department of Defense. So I think in this aspect, it's fine. Of course, always you want more, but I think it's okay. Regarding VC, as we mentioned before, it's considered to be a graveyard of the pharmaceutical company. I think it's going to change now. You have more technology that can serve as a platform for other CNS indications. And when this starts, it will drive also the spinal cord injury for a better solution. VC will not invest in a population less than 50,000 in North America. It will not work. The only thing that we can say, and it's in our hands, is to bring a company like Andy has or Neuroxon to become public. And when it's public, let's say something. Everything is transparent. You can call your bank or even go to your app and invest. Okay, and if it's good, it's good, and then that will drive the innovation in the company and also in the whole sector. So I really believe that what Neuroxon did in this year, it's one of the hardest years to complete, raise of several millions. Of course, everything is public, so I'm not saying anything not non-public. In one of the top year for the industry, that means that there are ways to, even as a very young company, to become public. You can have the funds, and when you're public, it's another game. You need to create your own awareness. You can have a good IR and a PR to drive more and more the awareness of your product and also the sector.
Yeah, agree. And yeah, I think, Leo, you recognize what we certainly do is we have a bit of a responsibility here. I think we're sort of hopefully leading the way to, I mean, I think our vision, a decade from now.
Yeah, we are complementary. I'm biopharmaceutical, you're medical device. Yeah. In the end, it's not one man show. We want to have a solution. And I hope. And
even within medical device, I welcome others, right? So if we can, blaze a bit of a trail, show, because typically SCI, this has been said on the call, I think already a few times, but has not been seen as the area to invest. So it is rare that two companies like ours have been able to list and attract, but that also puts a burden, right? So a bit of a double responsibility. First, foremost, SCI community has been promised translation. That's our vision, our mission, but also creating an environment where the next players and those with great ideas can come. And I also want to recognize that when we went to the investment community, obviously your business case and your management team, can they get it done? The addressable market, the technology, the IP, and market access scenarios, clearly all necessary.
And the team.
Well, the team was number one. That was the first one. Actually, you did the first thing they'll look at, actually, who's doing this? Can they get it done? Have they done it before, right? So yeah, 100%. But really right near that was, okay, we get it. You have a little bit, where's the credibility, right? So this is where I have to say, talking about having an advocacy group like the Reeve Foundation, having taken an interest in what we're doing, and the research community, being able to introduce them to investors or analysts and say, hey, obviously we think we're doing something that should be done and we're confident, but talk to the stakeholders. And having that united front is absolutely key in driving investment. Investors, analysts will reach these organizations. They will look into what they're doing. They'll reach the top clinicians, the experts in the field. So again, that theme of partnership actually can drive investment so companies can get things done. And then to state the obvious, what trails that is execution. So we've put out goals to get hardware and tools on the market and then sell them at a certain cadence in our business plan. That's our next or ongoing responsibility, is to get that done. And regardless of all the excuses, as you said, Leo, once you're publicly listed, you're transparent, they want results. Okay, there's supply chain issues, or there's this, or there's this. Yeah, we get it, but still get it done. So it puts you at a different level of responsibility, but hitting those milestones is what drives further investment, which allows you to do those next projects, when you look at, speaking for Onward, our pipeline, we're hopefully putting out a device with a certain indication second half of next year, and then are implantable in the years following. But there's a pipeline behind that of new usages and educations, all those things that require funding. So if we execute on those first ones, we can attract funding to get those next ones done. So again, I'll tie back the partnership theme. Having the support of the various communities has been crucial for us to present our case to the investment community.
Great, thanks, Andy. I'm going to start to move towards this conclusion.
Can I just add to that? I think because again, in my position, I have quite a holistic view of this. I'm only dealing with startups, so startups are always going through funding rounds, and there's so many variables here. And Andy's right; it's having that infrastructure and that partnership network, because they will look at that. Investors will look at that. They'll look at the squad. They'll look at your science. They'll look at your data. They look at everything, but they also want absolute clarity on your path, on your journey. I talk to many early stage startups, and they'll send me their slide deck that they intend to put in front of investors. And I have to comment on it because they can get a little bit giddy and they're going after 5 or 6 indications straight away. And I'm like, well, what are you saying to the investors? You can't go to them with that. You've got to have absolute clarity of message on where you are. You've got to understand the series rounds of funding and milestones that are expected along the way. You've got to be very clear with your message, because ultimately it's obvious statement, but investors are looking for an ROI. So like Andy said, they need to know, it's time bound. It's when are you going to hit a certain milestone along a certain pathway. And the CEO clearly plays a critical role in this. I see now Dave Marvel is a great example of this. Dave Marvel is a commercial CEO. You kind of have to be a salesperson now, because you're always raising. You're the face, you're the front of the company. You're always in front of investors. So if you're not a CEO like Dave that has blazed a trail before and bought companies through research and into commercialization, and then you go on to do it again and again and again, and that's the nature of these people that go on to do that. A lot of CEOs now are coming out of academia. So they're first-time CEOs, where maybe they've created the idea or the concept whilst in academia, and then they're trying to develop a startup. It's so important for startups like that they surround themselves with the right level of experts. You've got, everything from clinical, regulatory, but you also have that commercial element as well. Leo, I noticed, I was looking at your business earlier, and I noticed, because you've only been established, a couple of years now, you very quickly set up your board of directors.
Just 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years. So you very quickly set up, I was looking on your website, you very quickly set up your board of directors and your scientific and advisory board. And it looks to me, I don't know these people in any great depth other than scanning at their profiles, but you seem to have a good balance there of commercial people, technical people. And I think it's so important that you have these people, because again, that's the sort of thing investors will look at, that infrastructure as well as your partnerships.
I can add, Lens, I would say you need to be focused, of course, is what you try to say. But on the other hand, if you try to raise funds, don't put only the spinal cord injury, okay? Usually you get questions of, do you have other indications? Do you treat other CNS?
Yeah.
Okay, so be prepared to that too as a startup. Of course, each product in the pipeline, that's money, the money that you need to raise later. So don't give a list of 20 products that you want to have. Be modest and say, I'm going to 1 and 2. Those are different indications. Why it's different indications, different population that I want to target, and this will bring investors.
Great. Thanks, Leo, and thank you, Lindsay. I'm going to sort of pull together the strands of our discussion and head towards a conclusion now. And to do that, I think it'd be interesting to hear from each of our panelists just a few words about what you think, looking forward, the priorities are, or the opportunities are, or the exciting new developments are, those things that you think will push forward the boundaries of the things that we've just been discussing over the course of the next year or two. And if I could maybe start with you, Marco, just a few words in conclusion.
Sure. I think the message is very simple, although it could be hard to carry it out, but we all really need to work together. I think a lot of us have data that, if shared, can provide greater insight into how we move forward. I think consortiums can be built around topics that would be win-win if everyone participated. There can be this pre-competitive space where we can be working together to accelerate research in SCI. And I think the REEF Foundation is in a perfect position to be a neutral convener for that.
Great, thank you, Marco. Lindsay?
Yeah, I think the next couple of years are certainly going to be critical, because you have got, I think there's a wonderful opportunity for awareness to go through the roof in this space of medtech. And Onward will hopefully play a big part in that, with the partnership of the Christopher Reeve Foundation and all of the neuro rehab clinics that you're partnering with. Hopefully next year you'll commercialize your first product, right? So that is going to be hopefully groundbreaking and something that the industry or that part of medtech hasn't seen before in terms of rehabilitation, upper extremity. It's the one, very smart from Onward, because it's the one that their spinal cord injury patients want. So if their clinical trials are successful and the commercialization is successful, I think that will play a big part, with them being a public company as well, in really raising the roof on this very important part of medtech, and will hopefully blaze a trail and open a pathway for other early stage companies to follow suit. So I think the next 2 years is going to be really big in this space.
Thanks, Lindsay. Leo?
Yeah, I think we cover a lot of aspects in this roundtable. First of all, it was the discussion about the spinal cord injury as an orphan designation, which gives advantage for the company that deals with it. I hope other company will join this path, and the community, I would say. We talked about how we will recruit a spinal cord injury patient, acute or chronic, if you're talking about biopharmaceutical or device. We talked that everybody wants to deal with the holy grail of motoric functioning, but it's not that. It's a much bigger and holistic story about sensoric restoration, urine bladder, and functional restoration, I would say, in general. Any improvement for this patient is a miracle. It's not just walking. And so we need to be also modest and try to get some results for those patients. And from that, I'm sure that the success of this field for other companies will be enormous, and this field will be not called as a graveyard anymore. It's our responsibility.
Yeah. Thanks, Leo. And you get the last word, Andy.
So, agree with all. So just avoiding being redundant, I agree with your words. And I'll also say the obvious: we have to execute. We have to get this product, finalized, submitted to the regulatory agencies, cleared, scaled up, production. So I'll actually skip over all that, because that's just the must-dos. That's the obvious and on the market. The one I'll highlight, just because it hasn't been said as much, is taking this energy of the spirit of collaboration and research and advancement to what I mentioned at the beginning of the call, the finish line, which is policy. So it's going to take a very joined effort, just as we've seen, to get research done and the community mobilized into trials, and that energy to get government and private payers and those folks engaged in policy for these devices. So that's a lot of, obviously, industry's challenge as we look at that as our commercialization plan. If we put out a great product and it has great clinical backing and results, but nobody can access it, that's not a success in our eyes. That's a great start. So I think the clear next one to me, and this even circles back towards the beginning, when you're talking about what we're researching at the early stages, is what are the outcomes that the ultimate economic stakeholders want to see, in addition to the clinical ones, to get these devices so they get on the market and they have some reimbursement or some access. I think most people in the SCI world, and other diseases, I'm sure, have seen a bit of a cynicism when a product might get released and it's got its clearance letter, and the community says, well, so what? I probably can't have it because it's a very expensive robotic or a very expensive therapy. So I view the need for these groups that are partnering to look at the whole spectrum, from not just great data and research, which is the foundation, but the finish line being products in people's homes, or, you know, and helping people, versus on the market and sort of waiting for policymakers to step up, because it's really going to take a driving force. And that's where partnership is important, because an industry, a company going for coverage is a singular voice that only has so much effect. It really has to be the combined industry partners, the advocacy, the research going together to vouch for their populations.
Great point, Andy.
Thank you, Andy. And on behalf of Health Tech World, thank you to all of our panelists. I think anybody from the SCI community, anybody with an interest in the SCI community and the future of that, will have been enormously encouraged to hear so many positive voices today talking about the way in which companies, businesses, government, and the clinical community are working together. So thank you to our panelists for that discussion. If you're watching this on behalf of Health Tech World, please share it. I think it's really important that as many people as possible see this discussion and engage with some of the subjects that we talked about. So I hope whatever you're doing, you enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll close there.